The mafia boss had married dozens of women. At least, that's what everyone believed. The newspapers called him a ruthless playboy. The business magazines described him as cold, calculating, impossible to impress. Social media insisted no woman ever held his attention for long. Every one of them was wrong. Because the moment Roman Belafonte looked into his new wife's eyes, he forgot the entire room existed. The wedding had ended nearly an hour earlier. The orchestra had packed away its instruments. Luxury cars carried the last guests through the iron gates of Belafonte Estate. Inside the mansion, servants quietly carried wedding gifts toward the east wing, while family advisors congratulated themselves on securing the future of the Belafonte empire. No one paid much attention to the bride. Why would they? She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't the daughter of a senator. She wasn't the wealthy heiress everyone expected Roman to marry. She had been one of the household maids only 2 days earlier. Elodie Bennett, 27 years old, quiet, kind, plus-sized. The sort of woman powerful families rarely noticed until they needed something cleaned. Now she carried the Belafonte name, and half the city couldn't stop laughing about it. The tabloids called it the Maid marriage. Comment sections mocked her appearance. Television hosts joked that Roman must have lost a bet. None of them understood what had really happened. Neither did Elodie. She stepped carefully into the master bedroom, carrying a single worn suitcase. Compared to the room itself, her belongings looked painfully small. 3 simple dresses, a cardigan with carefully repaired sleeves, an old paperback novel held together with tape, a faded family photograph, and one small silver music box whose chipped paint revealed years of careful handling. That was everything she owned. Roman stood silently in the doorway, watching her unpack, not studying her, remembering her. His advisors exchanged worried glances behind him. They had never seen their boss like this. Normally, Roman noticed everything: security positions, escape routes, business calls. Tonight, he noticed only one person. When Elodie reached for the music box, she smiled faintly. It wasn't meant for anyone else, just herself. Yet that tiny smile struck Roman harder than any bullet ever had. His cousin leaned toward him. "You don't have to keep pretending now." Roman slowly turned. Pretending? The marriage. His cousin lowered his voice. "The inheritance is secured. Give it a few months. Arrange a generous settlement, and everyone moves on." Roman said nothing. The advisor standing nearby quietly nodded in agreement. She's served her purpose. Roman's eyes became dangerously still. For several long seconds, the room remained silent. Then he spoke, without taking his eyes off Elodie. No, just one word. Quiet, certain, absolute. Every advisor looked confused. Every relative exchanged uncertain glances, because that wasn't the answer anyone expected. Roman waited until they quietly left the room. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. His gaze remained fixed on the woman, carefully placing the old music box beside the bed. 15 years, thousands of cities searched, hundreds of dead ends, countless nights wondering whether she was alive, and now she stood only a few feet away, unaware that the boy she once saved had never stopped searching for her. Roman barely whispered the words. "So," his voice trembled for the first time in years, "it really is you." The next morning, Belafonte Manor woke to confusion, not because Roman had married. Everyone knew that had become inevitable. The confusion came from who he had married. The breakfast table, normally reserved for discussions about investments and business expansion, buzzed with barely concealed disbelief. His aunt folded the morning newspaper onto the table with unnecessary force. Across the front page was a photograph of Roman, standing beside Elodie outside the cathedral. The headline read, Mafia heir marries housemaid in shocking last-minute ceremony. His cousin scoffed. The city thinks we've lost our minds. Another relative laughed. They're asking whether she's secretly pregnant. They're asking worse than that, someone muttered. Roman calmly poured himself coffee. He didn't respond. His silence irritated them even more. Finally, his uncle leaned forward. You rejected governors' daughters. You rejected billionaires' heirs. You even turned down the Valenti alliance. He narrowed his eyes. So explain this. Roman met his gaze without the slightest emotion. I don't owe anyone an explanation. The room fell silent. No one challenged him again. They all knew better. But once breakfast ended, the whispers resumed throughout the mansion. The staff were just as stunned. Most had worked beside Elodie for years. She was the first to arrive every morning, the last to leave every evening. She remembered birthdays, helped new employees without being asked, often stayed late to finish someone else's work. No one disliked her. They simply couldn't imagine her becoming Mrs. Belafonte overnight. Least of all Elodie herself. She still felt uncomfortable walking through the mansion. Whenever a servant addressed her as Madam, she instinctively looked behind her. Surely they meant someone else. Old habits refused to disappear. Later that afternoon, Roman entered the library looking for estate records. He stopped when he noticed something on the reading table. The small silver music box. Elodie had left it beside an open novel while helping the kitchen staff prepare lunch. He hesitated, then carefully picked it up. The chipped silver finish looked exactly as he remembered. His thumb traced the tiny scratch across one corner, the same scratch made years ago, when a frightened little girl had accidentally dropped it while running through smoke. His heartbeat quickened. It couldn't be another one. It was the one. The music box he thought had vanished forever. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Roman gently placed it back exactly where he found it. Elodie appeared carrying a basket of fresh linens. She looked surprised to see him. I'm sorry, she said softly. I'll move my things. Roman shook his head. No. His voice was gentler than she expected. You don't have to apologize for existing. The words caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Roman quietly left the library. Outside the door, he closed his eyes for a brief moment. The music box had confirmed what his heart already knew. But one painful question still remained. If she truly was the little girl from 15 years ago, why did she look at him like a complete stranger? Rain began falling just after sunset. The steady rhythm against the mansion's tall windows filled the hallways with a strange sense of calm. Belafonte Manor always felt quieter during storms. Employees finished their duties early. Visitors hurried home. Even the security guards spoke more softly. Elodie welcomed the silence. The past 2 days had felt unreal. Every newspaper seemed determined to remind the world that a maid had somehow become the wife of Roman Belafonte. She still wasn't sure how to carry the title, so instead of attending another formal dinner with relatives who barely acknowledged her, she slipped into an old music room hidden in the west wing. Dust covered the grand piano. Portraits of Roman's ancestors lined the walls. Near the fireplace stood a worn wooden chair. Elodie sat down and reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She removed the little silver music box. It had belonged to her mother, or at least that was what she had always believed. Carefully, she wound the tiny key. The room filled with a soft, delicate lullaby. A melody so gentle it almost disappeared beneath the sound of the rain. Outside the room, Roman stopped walking. The first note stole the air from his lungs. No, it couldn't be. His hand tightened around the walking cane he carried out of habit after an old injury. The melody continued. Every note unlocked a memory buried beneath 15 years of silence. Smoke, flames, a neighborhood apartment building burning in the middle of the night. a frightened little boy trapped beneath a fallen beam. Then, a little girl, round cheeks, messy hair, holding a tiny silver music box against her chest. She had crawled through the smoke, taken his trembling hand, and whispered, "If we keep singing, we'll be brave together." The two children had quietly hummed the lullaby until firefighters found them. Roman had searched for her after the tragedy. Her family had disappeared before he could even learn her last name. Years passed. The city changed. People moved away. Every search ended the same way. Nothing. Until now. The music stopped. Roman slowly pushed open the door. Elodie looked up and smiled politely. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize anyone could hear." Roman stared at the music box, then at her. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Where did you learn that song?" She looked down at the tiny silver box. "My mother used to sing it to me." Roman felt his heart pounding. It was the only thing I remembered after. The fire. The world seemed to stop. She remembered the fire. She remembered the song. But when she looked at him, there was no recognition in her eyes, only polite confusion. Roman finally understood. He had found the girl he never stopped searching for. The only tragedy left was that she no longer remembered the frightened little boy who had spent 15 years trying to find her. Roman didn't sleep that night. The melody from the music box echoed through his thoughts until dawn. He could still see the frightened little girl holding his hand as smoke filled the hallway. She had been no older than 12. She should have been terrified. Instead, she had comforted him. Then she disappeared. Now she was sleeping beneath the same roof, and somehow, she had no memory of him. By sunrise, Roman made a decision. He wanted proof, not hope, not assumptions. Proof. Without informing anyone, he instructed his chief of security to retrieve every record connected to the apartment fire from 15 years earlier. School enrollment files, property records, hospital admissions, newspaper archives, anything that mentioned the Bennett family. The search lasted 3 days. When the first reports arrived, Roman locked himself inside his study. The more he read, the heavier his heart became. Elodie's family hadn't left the neighborhood voluntarily. They had been driven out. Her father, Nathan Bennett, had owned a small construction company. Respected, hard-working, honest. Then, just months after the fire, he was accused of embezzling money from one of the Belafonte family's development projects. The scandal spread quickly. Newspapers branded him a thief. Banks canceled his loans. Clients disappeared. Within weeks, the Bennett family had lost everything. They packed what little they owned and vanished from the city. Roman frowned. Something about the case felt wrong. Nathan Bennett had never been convicted. The investigation simply disappeared. No trial, no verdict, just accusations. He ordered his investigators to dig deeper. Late that evening, another file landed on his desk. It had been hidden inside the company's oldest archives. Inside was a payment ledger, several signatures, and one familiar name, Vincent Belafonte, Roman's great-uncle, one of the most influential men in the organization during that time. According to the documents, Vincent had secretly authorized false financial statements only weeks before Nathan Bennett's reputation was destroyed. Roman's blood ran cold. His own family had orchestrated the lie, not to protect the company, to seize Nathan's construction contracts at a fraction of their value. An innocent man had been sacrificed for profit. A family had been destroyed. A little girl had lost her home, and Roman had spent 15 years believing fate had separated them. It hadn't. Someone had done it deliberately. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant stepped inside. "Sir, your great-uncle Vincent has arrived for dinner." Roman slowly closed the file. His expression hardened. The man responsible for destroying Elodie's childhood was sitting downstairs, smiling across the family table. Dinner at Belafonte Manor had always been a performance. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath antique chandeliers. Servants moved silently between courses. Every smile seemed carefully rehearsed, every conversation carefully measured. That evening, however, Roman wasn't listening to the discussions about investments or shipping contracts. His attention remained fixed on one man, Vincent Belafonte, the same great-uncle who laughed easily while carving his steak, the same man whose signature appeared on documents that had destroyed Nathan Bennett's life 15 years earlier. Watching him smile made Roman's stomach tighten. Across the table, Elodie quietly served herself the smallest portion of food. Old habits. Years of making sure everyone else had enough before she did. Roman noticed. So did Vincent. The older man smirked. It seems our new bride still hasn't grown accustomed to luxury. A few relatives laughed. Elodie lowered her eyes. I'm still learning. Her answer was polite. Too polite. Roman set down his fork. She doesn't need to change. The room fell silent. Vincent forced a smile. Of course not. I was only joking. Roman's expression remained unreadable. I wasn't. No one spoke for the rest of the meal. After dinner, Elodie slipped upstairs to change. She never noticed the shadow watching from the end of the hallway. An hour later, she returned to her room. The door stood slightly open. She frowned. She distinctly remembered locking it. Carefully, she stepped inside. The room looked untouched. Then she noticed the drawers, pulled open, clothes folded neatly on the bed, her suitcase unzipped. Someone had searched everything. Her heartbeat quickened. Nothing expensive was missing, because she owned nothing expensive. Then she looked toward the bedside table. The silver music box. Gone. Panic swept through her. She searched every shelf, every drawer, every corner of the room. Nothing. A soft knock sounded behind her. Roman stepped into the doorway. The moment he saw the room, he understood. What happened? They took it. Her voice trembled. My music box. Roman's eyes darkened. They weren't looking for jewelry. He glanced around the room. They came for something specific. Just then, one of the estate's security officers hurried down the hallway. Sir, Roman turned. The guard held up a small object wrapped in a linen napkin. We found this in the West Garden. Roman carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside lay Elodie's silver music box. Its lid had been forced open. Whoever stole it hadn't wanted the music. They had been searching for something hidden inside. Roman slowly looked toward the family wing of the mansion. The search wasn't over anymore. It had just become a race. Roman carried the damaged music box into his private study. Neither he nor Elodie spoke. The deep scratch across the lid wasn't there before. Someone had forced it open with a knife. Not carefully. Desperately. As though they believed something priceless was hidden inside. Roman placed the little silver box beneath a desk lamp. What if they were right? He said quietly. Elodie frowned. What do you mean? He turned the music box over in his hands. My family doesn't break into rooms to steal keepsakes. His eyes met hers. They break into rooms when they're afraid. The sentence lingered between them. Roman pressed gently against the wooden base. Nothing happened. He examined the hinges, the winding key, the tiny brass screws. Then his thumb brushed against an uneven edge beneath the velvet lining. He paused. Did you ever notice this? Elodie leaned closer. No. Using the tip of a letter opener, Roman carefully lifted the faded velvet. A hidden compartment slowly sprang open. Both of them froze. Inside rested several yellowed documents folded into impossibly small squares. There was also a tiny brass key. Elodie stared in disbelief. My mother never told me. Roman carefully unfolded the first document. It was a handwritten letter. Nathan Bennett's signature appeared at the bottom. The second document was even more shocking. Copies of financial ledgers, construction contracts, payment records. Each one contradicted the accusations that had ruined Nathan's reputation. The final page carried a handwritten note from Elodie's mother. "If anything happens to us, protect these. One day, someone honest will need them." Elodie covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. "My parents knew." Roman nodded slowly. They knew the truth. They kept the evidence. They were waiting for the right time. For 15 years, the proof of Nathan Bennett's innocence had traveled unnoticed inside a child's music box, hidden in plain sight. Roman looked toward the study windows. Whoever searched Elodie's room hadn't found the compartment, but now they knew it existed, which meant they would come back. As if summoned by the thought, alarms suddenly echoed throughout Belafonte Manor. One of the estate guards burst through the study doors. "Sir!" Roman stood immediately. "What is it?" "The security cameras caught someone inside the archive wing." The guard swallowed hard. "They're heading toward this floor." Roman quietly folded the documents and handed them to Elodie. "Don't let go of these." "What about you?" A calm determination settled across his face. "I think it's time my family learned that they failed to bury the truth." The intruder never reached Roman's study. Estate security intercepted him in the east corridor before he could climb the final staircase. He tried to run. He failed. Within minutes, the masked man sat handcuffed inside the mansion's security office. Roman entered without saying a word. The room fell silent. The guard removed the intruder's mask. Roman didn't recognize him. That wasn't surprising. People like Vincent Belafonte rarely did their own dirty work. "Who sent you?" Roman asked. The man looked away. "I don't know what you're talking about." Roman calmly placed the recovered documents on the table. "You broke into my wife's room." Still no answer. "You searched for this." Silence. Roman sighed. Then he nodded toward the security director. "Show him." The director switched on a large monitor. Security footage filled the screen. The intruder, the break-in, the theft of the music box, the attempted escape. Every step had been recorded. The man's confidence disappeared. Within an hour, he confessed. Not because Roman threatened him, because the evidence left no room to lie. Vincent Belafonte had hired him. The order was simple: find the music box, destroy whatever was inside, leave no trace. That confession triggered a chain reaction. Investigators immediately obtained warrants. Old company archives were reopened. Financial records once sealed by powerful attorneys were examined again. The hidden ledgers inside the music box matched everything investigators uncovered. Shell companies, forged invoices, false accusations, bribed officials, decades of corruption, carefully protected by one influential member of the Belafonte family. Before sunrise, Vincent Belafonte was arrested. So were two former executives and an accountant who had helped falsify the records years earlier. The morning newspapers carried a different Belafonte headline for the first time in decades. Historic fraud exposed inside powerful family empire. Later that afternoon, Roman found Elodie standing alone in the mansion garden. She watched the fountain quietly, as though trying to absorb everything that had happened. "My father wasn't a criminal," she whispered. Roman shook his head. "No, he never was." Fresh tears filled her eyes. "For 15 years, her voice broke. People looked at my family like we were thieves." Roman stepped closer. "And now they'll know the truth." She smiled weakly. "There was something I couldn't understand." He waited. "Why did you protect me from the first day?" Roman looked at the old music box resting in her hands, then back at her. A gentle smile touched his face. "Because," he paused, "I've been looking for you much longer than you realize." Elodie frowned in confusion. Roman took a slow breath. It started 15 years ago. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of blooming roses through the Belafonte gardens. Neither Roman nor Elodie seemed to notice. The world around them faded into silence. Only the music box remained between them. Roman rested one hand on the stone railing. For the first time in years, the fearless head of the Belafonte family looked uncertain. "I've told judges things they didn't want to hear." He gave a quiet laugh. "I've negotiated with men who wanted me dead." His smile faded. "But telling you this," he looked into her eyes, "somehow scares me more." Elodie waited patiently. Roman drew a slow breath. "When I was 12, there was a fire in the apartment building where my grandfather kept one of our old properties." Her expression softened. "I remember the fire. I was trapped." He continued quietly. "A ceiling beam collapsed. I couldn't get out. I thought I was going to die." He paused. Then, a little girl crawled through the smoke. Elodie's heartbeat quickened. Roman smiled faintly. She wasn't much bigger than I was. She carried a little silver music box. And while we waited for the firefighters, she squeezed my hand and sang a lullaby. The garden fell silent. Elodie slowly looked down at the music box resting in her hands. Her fingers began trembling. Fragments of memory surfaced. Smoke, heat, a frightened boy crying in the darkness, a small hand gripping hers, the melody, the lullaby. She closed her eyes, then suddenly gasped. "I remember." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "The boy," she looked back at Roman, "was you." He nodded. "I searched for you for 15 years. Her eyes widened. "What?" "I visited every neighborhood where your family might have gone. I hired investigators. I checked school records. I even kept the newspaper clipping from the fire." He smiled sadly. "Every lead ended the same way. Nothing. I thought I'd lost the only person who ever taught me that kindness could exist without expecting anything in return." Elodie wiped away another tear. "And when I walked into this house, I recognized you immediately." She stared at him. "You knew?" "From the first moment. The music box, your smile, the way you thanked every servant by name. It was always you." A long silence followed. Then Elodie whispered the question that had lived quietly inside her heart since the wedding. "So, you didn't marry me because you had no choice?" Roman stepped closer. "The inheritance forced me to marry." He smiled gently. "But fate chose my wife." For the first time since entering Belafonte Manor, Elodie no longer felt like an outsider. She felt like someone who had finally been found. Belafonte Manor had never felt so quiet. The reporters were gone. The court hearings had ended. Vincent Belafonte and his co-conspirators had been convicted, bringing an end to the decades-old fraud that had destroyed Nathan Bennett's reputation. For the first time in 15 years, the Bennett family name had been publicly cleared. The headlines eventually moved on. Roman and Elodie did not. One evening, as the sun dipped below the estate gardens, Elodie wandered into the old music room. The grand piano still rested beneath the tall windows. Dust no longer covered it. Someone had been caring for the room. She smiled when she realized who. Roman was already there. He stood beside the fireplace, the restored silver music box resting on the piano. Its scratches had been carefully repaired, not erased, preserved, like memories that had once been painful, but no longer needed to be hidden. "You fixed it," Elodie said softly. Roman nodded. "I wanted it to last another 50 years. She laughed. "I think it already survived enough." So did we. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither spoke. There was no need. Some conversations had already been finished, years before. They had simply waited for the right time to be heard. Roman gently wound the tiny key. The familiar lullaby filled the room once again, not as a reminder of fear, as a celebration of survival. Elodie stepped closer. You know, she smiled. I spent years believing kindness never changed anything. Roman raised an eyebrow. And now? She looked around the room that had once felt impossibly large. I think it changes everything. Roman reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. It was the marriage contract, the agreement that had united them to satisfy his grandfather's will. Without saying a word, he tore it neatly in half. Then again, and again. The pieces drifted into the fireplace. Our marriage isn't being held together by an inheritance anymore, he said quietly. It hasn't been for a long time. Emotion filled Elodie's eyes. You waited 15 years. I would have waited 15 more. She shook her head, smiling through tears. You always were stubborn. So were you. She slipped her hand into his. This time, neither of them was a frightened child escaping a fire. Neither carried the weight of lies that belonged to someone else. They were simply two people who had finally found the road back to each other. Outside, the evening breeze carried the last notes of the lullaby through the open window. To the rest of the world, Roman Belafonte had been forced to marry a plus-size maid to protect his family's empire. Only they knew the truth. He hadn't married a stranger. He had finally come home to the girl he never stopped loving.